There are moments in life when you are wounded in ways no one else can see. The pain may come from betrayal, rejection, lies, or unfair treatment. You try to move forward, but deep inside you wonder if justice will ever come. You ask silently, does God see what happened? Does He care about what was done to me? The truth is that God is never blind to injustice, and He is never indifferent to pain. When someone hurts you, heaven does not ignore it. In ways both visible and invisible, God begins to work, not always in the timing you expect, and not always in the manner you imagine, but always with perfect wisdom and righteousness. One of the first signs that God is dealing with those who hurt you is a shift you begin to notice in their peace. A person who causes harm may appear strong and confident on the outside, but when God begins to move in a situation, an unrest often settles into their life. The calm they once displayed begins to fade. They may become restless, uneasy, or dissatisfied without understanding why. This is not coincidence. When someone walks outside of what is right, the weight of that choice often follows them. While you may be seeking healing, God may be working on their hearts, stirring conviction in ways that no human argument ever could. Another sign is that truth has a way of rising to the surface. Lies can live for a while, but they cannot live forever. What was hidden begins to be revealed, sometimes slowly and sometimes suddenly. Situations that once seemed confusing begin to make sense. Others may begin to see what you experienced. This does not always happen in a dramatic way, but over time, clarity replaces confusion. God is a God of truth. And when He begins to move in a situation, deception loses its power. Even when no one speaks on your behalf, truth has a voice of its own. You may also notice that the influence of the person who hurt you begins to weaken. Doors that once opened easily for them may begin to close. Opportunities may shift. Relationships around them may change. This is not always a punishment in the way people imagine, but it is often a redirection. God has a way of rearranging circumstances so that actions have consequences. While you may have felt powerless in the moment of hurt, God is never powerless. He sees the full picture, and He knows how to address what no one else can fix. At the same time, something begins to change inside you. While God is working on the situation, He is also working on your heart. The pain that once felt overwhelming begins to loosen its grip. You start to see things differently. The anger that once burned so intensely begins to soften. This does not mean the hurt was acceptable, and it does not mean the wrong did not matter. It means God is restoring something that was damaged. Healing is often one of the clearest signs that God is present in your story. When you begin to regain peace, it is evidence that He has not abandoned you. Sometimes another sign appears in the form of distance. The person who hurt you may drift out of your life in unexpected ways. Paths separate, communication fades, circumstances change. At first, this distance may feel strange or even painful, but often it is a form of protection. Not every separation is a loss. Some separations are an answer to prayers you whispered in your most difficult nights. God knows when a connection is no longer healthy, and He knows how to create space when space is needed. What feels like an ending may actually be the beginning of safety and restoration. There are also times when conviction begins to touch the heart of the one who caused harm. This may not be visible right away, but God has ways of speaking to people when no one else is around. A memory may return to them. A sense of regret may surface. They may begin to reflect on their actions in ways they never did before. Not every person responds to conviction, but the presence of conviction itself is a sign that God is at work. He cares enough about justice to address wrong, and He cares enough about people to call them toward what is right. Perhaps one of the most powerful signs is the growth that begins to take place in your own life. While someone intended harm, God begins to bring strength. You become wiser, you become more discerning, you begin to understand your worth in a deeper way. What once broke you begins to build you. This does not happen overnight, but step by step, you start to see that the pain did not have the final word. God has a way of transforming wounds into wisdom and trials into testimony. You may also notice new opportunities appearing where there once were none. Doors begin to open that you never expected. New relationships form. New paths unfold. It is as if life begins to move forward again after a long season of standing still. This forward movement is not random. It is often a sign that God is leading you into something new while leaving the past behind. The place where you were hurt does not have to be the place where you remain. In quiet moments, you may sense a reassurance deep within your spirit that you are not alone. Even when questions remain unanswered, there is a steady presence that brings comfort. This peace does not come from circumstances being perfect. It comes from knowing that God is aware, God is just, and God is faithful. He does not overlook what was done, and He does not forget what you endured. There will be times when you are tempted to take matters into your own hands, to seek revenge, or to hold tightly to resentment. But when you release those burdens, you make room for God to work in ways you never could. Justice in His hands is always wiser than justice in ours. He sees motives, intentions, and hidden things that no one else can see. He knows how to bring balance where there was wrong and healing where there was pain. And as time moves forward, you begin to realize that the story did not end with the hurt. What felt like a breaking point became a turning point. What felt like abandonment became a season where God was working behind the scenes. Even when you could not see it, He was present. Even when you did not understand it, He was active. Even when you felt forgotten, you were never out of His sight. You begin to walk with a little more strength, a little more wisdom, and a little more peace than before. There are times in life when you carry wounds that no one else seems to notice. Someone may have spoken words that cut deeply, betrayed your trust, or treated you unfairly, and you were left to deal with the pain in silence. In those moments, it can feel as if your suffering has gone unseen and your story unheard. But one of the most powerful truths you can hold on to is this: God sees every wrong. Nothing escapes His awareness. Not a single tear falls without His notice, and not a single act of injustice slips past His attention. Even when the world moves on as if nothing happened, God remains fully aware of every detail. He sees not only what was done, but also the intent behind it, the circumstances surrounding it, and the effect it had on your heart. When you have been hurt, one of the greatest struggles is the feeling that justice may never come. You may replay events in your mind, wondering why it happened, and questioning whether the person who hurt you will ever be held accountable. It is easy to feel as though they have moved on without cons. Equance while you are left carrying the weight of the pain. But God's justice does not operate on human timelines. He is never rushed, never confused, and never uncertain about what must be done. What may look like delay is often divine patience, and what may feel like silence is often unseen activity. God does not ignore wrongdoing. He addresses it in ways that are wise, purposeful, and complete. Sometimes people believe they have escaped the consequences of their actions simply because nothing happens right away. They may continue living as though their choices had no impact, and this can be deeply discouraging for the one who was hurt. But God's view is eternal, and His understanding is perfect. He sees the beginning and the end at the same time. He knows how every action connects to another, and how every decision shapes the future. Because of this, He does not respond impulsively or emotionally. Instead, He works with precision and purpose, ensuring that justice is not only done, but done in the right way. There is a deep comfort in knowing that you do not have to carry the responsibility of making things right. When you try to take justice into your own hands, it often leads to more pain, more frustration, and more brokenness. Anger can consume your thoughts, and the desire for revenge can rob you of peace. But when you release that burden and trust God to handle what was done, something begins to change inside you. The weight becomes lighter, and the constant tension begins to ease. You realize that you are not responsible for fixing what someone else broke. God, in his wisdom and power, is fully capable of addressing every wrong in a way that no human ever could. God's awareness of injustice is not distant or impersonal. He does not observe your pain as a detached spectator. He understands it intimately. He sees the sleepless nights, the quiet tears, and the moments when your heart felt like it would break under the weight of what happened. He knows the questions you asked and the doubts that filled your mind. Even when you struggled to find the words to pray, he understood the cry of your heart. This kind of understanding is deeper than anything another person can offer. It means that you are never alone in your pain, even when it feels like no one else truly understands. Sometimes God allows time to pass before you see any evidence that he is working. During that time, it can be tempting to believe that nothing is happening. But much of what God does takes place beneath the surface in ways that are not immediately visible. Just as roots grow deep underground before a tree becomes strong above the ground, God often works in hidden ways before the results become clear. He may be arranging circumstances, preparing hearts, or setting events in motion that will unfold at the right time. What feels like stillness may actually be careful preparation. It is also important to remember that God's justice is always guided by his righteousness. Human justice can be flawed, influenced by emotions, misunderstandings, or incomplete information. But God sees everything perfectly. He knows what was done intentionally and what was done out of ignorance. He knows the difference between weakness and willful harm. Because of this, his response is always fair and always right. You can trust that he will not overlook what was wrong, and you can trust that he will not make a mistake in how he responds. Knowing that God sees every wrong also means that your pain has value in his sight. It matters to him that you are hurt. It matters to him that you struggled. You are not just another story in a long line of human experiences. You are an individual deeply known and deeply loved. When you feel forgotten by others, you are still remembered by him. When you feel dismissed by people, you are still valued by him. This truth becomes an anchor for your soul, holding you steady when emotions threaten to pull you under. There may be moments when you wish you could see immediate proof that God is working, but faith often requires trusting what cannot yet be seen. It means believing that even when circumstances seem unchanged, God remains active. It means holding on to the assurance that justice in his hands is certain, even when its arrival is delayed. Over time, you may begin to notice small signs that things are shifting, small reminders that God has not forgotten. These moments strengthen your confidence and remind you that his timing is always intentional. As you continue forward, the knowledge that God sees every wrong allows you to release the constant need to analyze the past. You do not have to replay every moment or search for every answer. You can rest in the confidence that nothing was missed and nothing was ignored. God's awareness is complete, his understanding is perfect, and his justice is sure. And in that truth, you can find the strength to keep moving forward, knowing that what was done to you has been fully seen and fully known by the one who holds all things in his hands. There is something unshakable about truth. It does not depend on popularity, and it does not disappear just because someone tries to hide it. When you have been hurt by deception, one of the deepest pains comes from knowing that what really happened may be misunderstood or completely unknown to others. You may have tried to explain your side only to feel ignored or doubted. You may have watched someone twist the story in their favor while you stood there feeling powerless to correct it. In moments like these, it can seem as though lies are stronger than truth. But time has a way of revealing what people try to conceal and go. D has a way of bringing light into places where darkness once seemed secure. Truth does not need constant defense in order to survive. While lies often require constant effort to maintain, truth stands on its own. A person who deceives must remember what they said, must work to keep the illusion alive. But truth remains steady without effort. Over time, inconsistencies begin to appear, and what once sounded convincing begins to unravel. This process may be slow and it may test your patience, but it is often how clarity emerges. What once seemed confusing begins to make sense, and what once felt hidden begins to come into view. When someone hurts you through dishonesty or betrayal, part of the pain comes from feeling misunderstood. You may wonder if others will ever see what really happened. You may even question yourself, replaying events in your mind and asking whether your feelings are valid. This uncertainty can be exhausting. But truth has a quiet persistence. Even when no one speaks on your behalf, truth has a way of making itself known. Circumstances change, new information comes forward, and patterns begin to reveal themselves. What was once dismissed may later be understood with clarity. God is deeply connected to truth because truth reflects His nature. Nothing false can remain strong in His presence forever. While deception may appear successful for a time, it cannot endure indefinitely. Eventually, what is hidden begins to surface. This does not always happen in dramatic or public ways. Sometimes it happens quietly through realization and understanding. Sometimes people begin to see things they did not notice before. They may recall moments that once seemed insignificant, but now carry new meaning. Slowly, the picture becomes clearer. One of the hardest parts of waiting for truth to come to light is resisting the urge to force it into the open. When you have been wronged, it is natural to want immediate vindication. You may feel the need to prove what happened or to make others understand your pain. But forcing truth often creates more conflict and more frustration. When truth unfolds naturally, it carries a strength that cannot be easily dismissed. It becomes evident in ways that arguments alone could never achieve. God knows how to reveal truth in the right moment and in the right way. There is also a certain peace that comes from trusting that truth does not disappear simply because it is temporarily unseen. Just as the sun continues to shine even when hidden behind clouds, truth remains present even when it is obscured. The passing of time often acts as a clearing away of those clouds. Situations change, perspectives shift, and what was once hidden becomes visible. When that happens, you begin to realize that truth was never truly lost. It was simply waiting for the right moment to be seen. Sometimes the revealing of truth begins within the hearts of those involved. A person who once accepted a false story may begin to question it. They may notice details that do not align or sense that something is not quite right. This inner realization can be powerful because it comes from genuine understanding rather than external pressure. When people arrive at truth on their own, it often leaves a deeper and more lasting impression. God can work within hearts and minds in ways that no argument ever could. As truth begins to surface, confusion often gives way to clarity. The events that once seemed tangled and complicated start to form a clearer picture. You may begin to understand why certain things happened the way they did. You may see connections that were not obvious before. This clarity does not erase the pain, but it often brings a sense of resolution. The uncertainty that once true bled you begins to fade, replaced by a steadier understanding of what took place. It is important to remember that the purpose of truth is not only to expose wrongdoing, but also to bring freedom. Living under the weight of deception can feel suffocating, but truth creates space to breathe again. When truth comes to light, it lifts the burden of confusion and replaces it with understanding. It allows you to move forward without constantly questioning the past. Instead of being trapped in uncertainty, you can step into a clearer and more stable place. There may be times when truth emerges in ways you did not expect. It may come through a conversation, a realization, or a change in circumstances. It may come through someone recognizing what they once failed to see. However it arrives, its presence often brings a sense of confirmation. You realize that what you experienced was real and that your pain was valid. This confirmation can be deeply healing because it restores a sense of confidence that may have been shaken. Waiting for truth to come to light requires patience and trust. It means believing that what is real does not need to be forced into existence. It means trusting that God understands what happened and knows how to reveal it in the right way. Even when the process feels slow, there is movement taking place beneath the surface. Each step brings things closer to clarity, even if you cannot yet see the full picture. Over time, you may come to see that truth has a quiet strength that cannot be permanently suppressed. It rises not always loudly, but steadily and surely. What was once hidden becomes known, and what was once doubted becomes clear. In that moment, you begin to understand that truth was never defeated. It was simply waiting for the right time to stand in the light. One of the most profound realities in seasons of hurt is that God is never working in just one side of the story. While you may be focused on the pain you experienced, God is working in ways that reach far beyond what you can see. He is not only concerned with comforting you and restoring your peace, but He is also able to work in the life of the person who caused the pain. This is often difficult to understand because when someone hurts you deeply, it can feel as though the situation is divided into two simple sides, yours and theirs. But God sees the entire picture at once. He understands every motive, every weakness, and every choice that led to the moment of hurt, and He knows how to address each heart in the way that is needed most. While you may be praying for relief, God may be working to produce growth within you. Pain has a way of revealing what comfort often hides. It exposes fears, attachments, and expectations that you may not have realized were there. In the middle of the struggle, this process can feel overwhelming. You may wonder why God would allow such difficulty in the first place. Yet over time, you may begin to see that He was strengthening parts of your heart that would have remained weak otherwise. You begin to develop discernment that helps you recognize what is healthy and what is harmful. You begin to understand your value in a deeper way, realizing that your worth is not determined by how someone else treated you. These changes do not happen all at once, but slowly and steadily you become stronger than you were before. At the same time, God is capable of working in the life of the one who hurt you. Even when you cannot see it, He can stir conviction in ways that no person ever could. There are moments when a memory returns unexpectedly, when a quiet realization settles into the mind, or when a sense of unease begins to grow. These moments are often the beginning of awareness. A person who once justified their actions may begin to see them differently. A person who once ignored the impact of their behavior may begin to recognize the damage that was done. This does not always lead to immediate change, but it is often the first step in a deeper process. It is important to understand that God's work in someone else's life may look very different from what you expect. Sometimes people imagine that justice must be dramatic or visible in order to be real, but often the most significant changes happened quietly in places where no one else can see. A hardened heart may begin to soften. A stubborn mind may begin to reconsider. A careless attitude may begin to shift toward responsibility. These changes are not always announced, and they are not always obvious, but they matter. God knows how to reach places within a person that no external pressure could ever touch. While this is happening, God continues His work within you. One of the clearest signs of this work is the gradual return of peace. At first, the pain may feel overwhelming, filling your thoughts and emotions day after day, but over time the intensity begins to lessen. The memories may still be there, but they no longer carry the same weight. You begin to notice moments when you feel calm again, moments when you are able to focus on the present instead of the past. These moments are signs of healing. They are evidence that God is restoring what was damaged and strengthening what was weakened. Another way God works within you is by reshaping your perspective. In the beginning, the hurt may feel like the defining moment of your story. It may seem as though everything revolves around what happened and how it affected you. But as healing progresses, your view begins to widen. You start to see that your life is bigger than that moment. You begin to recognize possibilities that once felt out of reach. The future starts to feel open again. Instead of overshadowed by the past. This shift in perspective is a powerful part of restoration because it allows you to move forward instead of remaining stuck. Sometimes God's work involves teaching you how to release what you cannot control. One of the most difficult parts of being hurt is the desire to make things right. You may wish you could change what happened or make the other person understand your pain, but there are some things that remain outside of your control, and trying to force them often leads to more frustration. As God works in your heart, you begin to learn how to let go of the need to control outcomes. This does not mean you stop caring about what happened. It means you trust that God is able to handle what you cannot. As this process continues, you may begin to notice growth in areas you did not expect. You may become more compassionate toward others who are hurting. You may become more patient in difficult situations. You may develop a deeper sense of empathy and understanding. These qualities often grow out of pain because pain has a way of connecting you to the struggles of others. What once felt like a purely negative experience begins to produce something meaningful within you. There is also a quiet strength that begins to form as God works in your life. This strength is not loud or boastful. It is steady and grounded. It allows you to face challenges with greater confidence and to handle difficulties with greater resilience. You realize that if you are able to endure that season, you are capable of facing what lies ahead. This realization becomes a source of courage, helping you move forward with a sense of assurance. Over time, you begin to see that God's work was never limited to a single moment or a single person. He was moving in ways that reached every part of the situation. While you were healing, He was working. While you were waiting, He was shaping. While you were wondering what would happen next, He was preparing the way forward. And through it all, He was weaving together a story that included growth, restoration, and a deeper understanding of His presence in your life. One of the clearest signs that God is at work in your life after you have been hurt is the quiet but undeniable movement forward that begins to take place within you. At first, after the pain, everything can feel stuck. Your thoughts may circle around the same memories, your emotions may rise and fall without warning, and it may seem as though life has paused in a moment you did not choose. But when God begins to move, there is often a gradual shift. It may not be dramatic at first, and it may not happen all at once, but slowly you begin to notice that you are not standing in the same place emotionally, mentally, or spiritually as you once were. Something within you begins to loosen, and the weight that once felt constant begins to lift little by little. Healing often begins in quiet ways. It might start with a single moment when you realize that you went an entire day without thinking about what happened. It might come when you remember the situation but no longer feel the same sharp pain you once did. The memory is still there, but it no longer controls your emotions the way it once did. This is often how God restores the heart, not by erasing the past, but by removing its power to dominate your present. The pain that once felt overwhelming becomes something you can carry without being crushed by it. This change is often so gradual that you may not notice it right away, but over time, it becomes clear that something inside you has been restored. As healing continues, peace often begins to take the place where turmoil once lived. At one time, your thoughts may have been filled with questions, frustrations, and unresolved feelings. You may have replayed conversations in your mind or imagined what you would say if given another chance. But as God works in your heart, that inner noise begins to quiet. The constant tension fades, and in its place comes a steadiness that was not there before. This peace does not mean that everything was fair or that the hurt was acceptable. It simply means that the pain is no longer in control. God's presence begins to settle into the places that once felt restless, bringing a calm that allows you to breathe freely again. Along with peace often comes a renewed sense of direction. Hurt has a way of making the future feel uncertain. It can shake your confidence and make you hesitant to move forward. You may question your decisions or doubt your ability to trust again. But when God begins to lead you out of that season, new opportunities often begin to appear. These opportunities may be small at first, new ideas, new goals, or new connections, but they represent movement. They are signs that your life is continuing and that the hurt did not bring everything to an end. Each step forward, no matter how small, becomes part of a larger journey toward restoration. Sometimes this forward movement includes new relationships or the strengthening of existing ones. The people who come into your life during a season of healing often bring encouragement and support in ways that feel meaningful and timely. These connections remind you that not everyone will hurt you and that trust, though once shaken, can be rebuilt. Healthy relationships often become part of God's way of restoring what was damaged, showing you that kindness and understanding still exist. Through these relationships, you begin to experience a sense of belonging and acceptance that helps mend the wounds left behind by past pain. Growth is another powerful sign that God is working in your life. The experience that once felt like it would break you begins to shape you instead. You become more aware of your boundaries and more confident in your values. You learn to recognize what is healthy and what is not. This growth often changes the way you see yourself. Instead of feeling defined by what happened to you, you begin to see yourself as someone who endured and came through. This shift in identity is deeply important because it allows you to move forward with strength instead of remaining tied to the role of someone who was only hurt. As you continue to heal, you may also notice a new sense of hope beginning to form. Hope can be difficult to hold on to after you've been wounded because pain has a way of making the future look uncertain. But God has a way of restoring hope in quiet and steady ways. You begin to believe that good things are still possible. You begin to imagine the future that is not defined by past experiences. This hope becomes a light that guides you forward, helping you take steps that once felt impossible. There is also a sense of freedom that comes with healing. When you are deeply hurt, it can feel as though the past has a hold on you that you cannot escape. The memories may feel close, and the emotions may feel overwhelming. But as God works in your life, that hold begins to weaken. You find that you are able to think about other things, focus on new goals, and invest your energy in meaningful ways. The past becomes part of your story, but it no longer controls the direction of your life. This forward movement often brings with it a quiet confidence. You begin to trust that you can face challenges and overcome difficulties. The strength you gain through the painful season becomes part of who you are. You realize that even though you did not choose what happened, you were. Able to endure it, this realization becomes a source of courage, reminding you that you are capable of moving forward no matter what lies ahead. Over time, the progress you make becomes undeniable. The person you are becoming is not the same person who first experienced the hurt. You carry more wisdom, more strength, and more understanding than before. What once felt like an ending becomes part of a new beginning, and the life ahead of you begins to take shape in ways that reflect healing, growth, and renewed purpose. When you step back and look at the journey, you begin to realize that what once seemed like a season of pure pain was never without purpose. Every tear, every question, and every moment of confusion was seen and understood by God. While you were trying to make sense of what happened, He was already at work, bringing truth into the light, restoring what was broken inside you, and handling matters in ways you could not see. The hurt you experienced was real, but it was never the final chapter of your story. God's justice does not fail. His timing does not falter, and His healing does not come halfway. Even when it felt like nothing was changing, He was guiding events, shaping hearts, and leading you toward a place of peace and strength. What was meant to harm you did not have the power to destroy you, and what was meant to discourage you did not have the power to stop your future. Instead, you were carried through a process that made you stronger, wiser, and more grounded than before. And as you move forward now, you can do so with confidence, knowing that nothing done against you was ever hidden from God, and nothing placed in His hands is ever left unfinished. God sees, God knows, and God will always make things right in His perfect time.